There it goes. Check the audio here. Make sure it's working. Okay, good. And good. All right. Gonna start a little early today, boys. Can you all hear the music? I don't know. No, obviously not. I can tell because it's not green. Never mind. Hold on.
Wonderland. Sticky sweet, gummy bears. Mind if I sit on your lap? Can you handle that?
Well, this is really weird, but I can't figure out how to get the sound working. But at least the voice works, so we'll be good to go. It was for a second. It happens. I don't know. I think I'm gonna have to play with this some more. We're using the new Rumble Studio to essentially be able to stream to all the platforms on Twitter and or X, I suppose, Rumble, locals, all of it. Hello and welcome everybody to the Crypto Mining Show, your one-stop shop for all cryptocurrency news from the perspective of a cryptocurrency miner. I go by Blind Red on the internet and Matthew in real life. And boy, do we have a show today. We are going to be talking about, of course, Senator Loomis, as well as Trump statements and RFK Jr. statements. Most of those I am debating if we're going to move that over to Rumble only, because anytime I talk about anything related to Trump on this channel, I lose 1,000 subscribers. So maybe we'll just move that over because, you know, it just seems like the algorithm doesn't like it. So that is how that's going to go. Other than that, we're also going to be talking about the centralization of Bitcoin and a concern from recent studies that shows that a majority of the hash rate is controlled by basically single entities surrounding Bitmain, and the kind of spinning up of multiple pools by Antpool, kind of obfuscating that. Really interesting stuff going on there. We're also going to be talking about BlockX's transition to Autolicos V2 coming up on August 10th, which obviously is going to be extremely interesting coming off of the X11 algorithm. And then we're going to be talking about Cybría or Cybría. They have their swap coming out on their layer 2 coming soon. We're also going to be talking about a lithium being launched on Zelcore, following, of course, the announcement last week of all of the ASICs surrounding them. And then we're going to be talking about the Chia situation, seeing that there's been a lot of questions surrounding it. We're going to cover, what has been covered on their Twitter and what we think about that. And then we have a whole bunch of hardware related news. There is going to be no recall for the Intel Raptor Lake CPUs, unfortunately, but you can still RMA your chip. And then we have the RTX 4070 to be in short supply in China next month due to lack of GDDR6X memory. I'm thinking this is due to the spinning up of GDDR7 memory in mass production for this quarter, which is also slated for the same time period. So don't be dismayed. I don't necessarily think that shortage is due primarily to just demand of the GPUs, but a shifting in what is being manufactured. AMD Ryzen 5 leaks on their benchmarks. Honestly, quite disappointing from my perspective, but we'll take a look at it and talk about it, of course. I did finish this build over here for QuakeCon. If you're going to be out at QuakeCon 2024, hit me up on Twitter, or however you can get a hold of me at inquiry@sonofatech.com. I'll try to meet up with you, say hi, all that sort of stuff. I'll be pretty busy just hanging with the kids, playing video games. So it is what it is, but I'm looking forward to it. That's kind of our one thing we like to do every year. We're also going to be talking about the Warthog network and the BitBoy disappearance, just briefly, not going to hammer on it too long. And then there's been a bunch of faulty NVIDIA H100 GPUs based on their HBM3 memory. At least that's the reason behind it, presumably. And then, of course, like we stated in the beginning, at the end of the show, we'll be talking about RFK Jr.'s promises for a Bitcoin strategic reserve. Of course, we're going to be talking about Trump's position on a strategic reserve of Bitcoin, as well as Senator Cynthia Lummis's proposal for accumulating Bitcoin to combat national debt. I think all of those things together are really interesting. And then finally, we will do Q&A at the end of the show. I want to thank everybody for being here. Don't forget, every week, sometime between 5 p.m. and 7 p.m. Central Standard Time, I will start a live show on the YouTube channel. It will also be on Rumble, as well as on Locals, as well as on Twitter. So whatever platform you prefer, I will be putting the chat up in the corner for you guys. This week's a little bit different just because of the manner in which I did the YouTube live stream, and the YouTube live chat will be added to the chat that's going on the screen later on down the line. But for now, it's regulated to the Rumble side of things, the local side of things, and the Twitter and Twitch side of things. So just to give you a heads up as far as all that's concerned. Any specific content surrounding speculative mines, I think some people were asking about that. That is all regulated to locals only now at sonofatech.locals.com. I want to thank all the supporters over there, and that's why it's over there. Let's go ahead and hop into the new research suggesting Bitcoin mining has been centralized around Bitmain. Now, obviously, this one is something I've been harping on for quite some time, more as it relates to the smaller cap layer 1 proof of work coins, a la Caspa, Lithium, Radiant, Cadena, that sort of thing, because it's much more impactful on those smaller coins. But it is even impacting Bitcoin as a whole. We've known this centralization problem has existed for quite some time. The data now is that we are getting basically verifiable research proving this out. And I think it brings up a serious issue within Bitcoin as a whole. For years, rumors have circulated that Bitcoin's largest mining machine manufacturer has secretly centralized the majority of Bitcoin's hash power. The theory is down to more than simple observation of the logo stamped on most mining cases. No skeptics think that Bitmain's pool itself, not just its machines, secretly creates the vast majority of blocks that are added to Bitcoin's ledger. A sleuth found a clue in Antpool's block template, a manually prioritized transaction immediately after the 6.25 Bitcoin block reward or Coinbase transaction. This new research by pseudonymous Bitcoin developer OXB10C seemingly confirms long-rumored practices by Antpool, hiding its massive operation under the names of ostensibly independent pools. In short, it warns that despite tens of thousands of decentralized nodes, Bitcoin might actually be quite centralized from a mining perspective. One template and custodian for supposedly independent pools. So specifically, OXB10C detected that BTC.com pool, Binance pool, Poolin, EMCD, and Raw pool show signs of using Antpool's method for prioritizing the post-Coinbase transaction. Antpool might also use a sixth pool, Brains, but OXB10C was still analyzing its Merkle branches as of the research publication time. Nearly identical Merkle branches might indicate that these 5 or 6 pools often use the exact same templates as Antpool for selecting transactions to include in a block. In other words, all of these pools often use Bitmain's machines, often assemble transactions according to Bitmain's block template, often prioritize the same manually configured post-Coinbase transaction as Bitmain, and often send Coinbase and transaction fees to the same custodian as Bitmain. It certainly makes Bitcoin look a little centralized. Looking at the Merkle branches, the Twitter post goes on to say that branches that mining pools send to miners as part of Stratum jobs, it's clear that BTC Pool Com, Binance Pool, Poolin, EMCD, Raw Pool, and possibly Brains have exactly the same template and custom transaction prioritization as Antpool. To compound upon that, a single custodian now controls the Coinbase addresses of at least 9 pools, representing 47% of the total hash rate. As demonstrated by this consolidation of binding rewards output from Antpool, F2 Pool, Binance Pool, Brains, BTC.com, SEC Pool, and Poolin. So there you go. Has Bitmain secretly centralized Bitcoin's proof of work? Founded in 2013, Bitmain is one of the oldest continuously operated Bitcoin companies. It's also gigantic, and 6 years ago sought to IPO for over $1 billion. There we go. I think I said that correctly. Every miner knows that Bitmain machines generate nearly all hash power on the Bitcoin network. What's not common knowledge is the size of Bitmain's Coinbase and fee-sharing pool, Antpool. According to its publicly reported hash rate, Antpool by Bitmain claims to generate just 1/4 of Bitcoin's hash rate. However, OXB10C suspects it might secretly control a majority. Because Bitcoin's mining rewards arrive randomly to the single miner who guesses the Bitcoin difficulty threshold's lottery-like winning number every 10 minutes, miners pool together to share work and average out of those random 3.125 BTC payouts. Prior to the halving, Coinbase rewards were 6.25 Bitcoin. On April 20th, 2024, that number halved to 3.125. Today, just 3 mining pools control the majority of Bitcoin's hash rate. However, new research is suggesting that Bitmain's Antpool has been disguising its work and submitting its winning blocks under the name of third-party pools. That Bitmain has a near monopoly on Bitcoin's physical machinery is common knowledge. By far, the most prevalent mining rigs performing proof-of-work hashing around the globe are Bitmain machines. Despite its famously poor customer service and product quality variability, its proprietary ASIC technologies have made its rigs unstoppably ubiquitous. Mononaut found more evidence that seems to support OXB10C theory that Antpool might secretly use third-party pools to cloak Bitmain's dominance. Mononaut traced Coinbase rewards from mining pools, Antpool, F2 Pool, Binance Pool, Brains, BTC.com, SEC Pool, Poolin, and then the Ultimus Pool, and 1 terahash, and Luxor. He found suspicious levels of cooperation from these supposedly competitive entities in allocating Coinbase rewards to a shard, possibly Antpool-controlled custodian. OXB10C couldn't confirm that SEC Pool and Sigma Pool entirely cloned Antpool's template, although they seem to share a similar template. In all, it's seemingly unlikely that up to 9 major Bitcoin mining pools use a shared custodian for Coinbase rewards unless a single entity is behind all of their operations. Ampool had little to say about the suspicious activities or research reports by OXB10C and Mononaut. Its most recent English language tweet, or there you go, only referenced making every hash count. Marty Bent, Matt Odell, and Matt Corallo, there we go, who also did a really good speech at the Bitcoin 2024 conference. I highly recommend checking out. By the way, discussed the allegations during a lengthy podcast. Corallo agreed with OXB10C and Mononaut. There's one pool that has near 50% of the hash power. In summary, if Ampool doesn't control more than half of Bitcoin's hash rate through collusion with or control over the other mining pools, it seems to be getting pretty close. Bitcoin developer OXB10C, as well as Mononaut, found evidence suggesting that Ampool and its alleged associates might control a majority of Bitcoin's average hash rate. Now, of course, there's a lot to be concerned about surrounding this, I think, but in general, as far as something like a 51% attack on Bitcoin, which would be the most obvious thing that people would point to and be afraid of, that is probably not going to happen because the success of Bitcoin is directly related to the success of Bitmain and Ampool themselves. I think what's more interesting to pay attention to, of course, would be that the way blocks are being formed and the prioritization of blocks, especially as the fees on the network go up, meaning that essentially what we will see is arbitrage attempts and et cetera that were similar to what we saw via MEV sandwiching on Ethereum. And I think that's the largest threat surrounding this. I am also, not a big fan of ASICs. I mean, that's been very clear from the very get-go as far as I'm concerned. At least with GPU hardware, they're consumer available. And at the end of the day, there are still 3 companies that provide hardware on the GPU side of things. On the CPU side of things, there's 2 companies, maybe more if you enable cell phone mining with like Qualcomm and all that other stuff. And you get a more consumer-friendly, accessible hardware to mine with. And we've been seeing these interesting business moves, I think, from ASIC manufacturers on all of these new L1 proof of work coins that do resemble essentially pumping and dumping through essentially hardware arbitrage at the end of the day. And we're witnessing, I think, a little bit more obviously on the Radiant network right now, where on Radiant, what we're seeing is, the entity, which I'll have an interview out tomorrow with Radiant talking about this in more detail. So make sure you're subscribed to the channel. I'm looking forward to that one coming out. But when we look at that, it's very obvious that the business model is to mine a bunch of the coin, have a stake in the actual total volume of that coin so that you can manipulate price to a certain extent, thereby driving up the price of the coins up, which then drives up the price of the miners, which means that you can sell the miners for a lot more than they're actually worth. And if you only have a few select companies, where we even hear, of course, there might be some connection between Ice River and Bitmain as well. So if we really are like looking at maybe a couple companies, but really at the end of the day, one single entity that's controlling the hash rate on a network and then later releasing those, is it really decentralized at all at that point? And I think that hash rate decentralization is a very important topic that gets basically ignored in favor of pumping the price of the coin in terms of fiat. And I think a lot of people, even here in chat, will do that and defend that to the end of the day for Caspa because they have a bunch of Caspa they own, or do it for Radiant because they have a bunch of Radiant they own. And just because you own a bag, like the longevity and the health of the network should be your primary concern, and adhering to fundamentals and principles surrounding crypto should be the primary concern. So if you're going to come out and say that it's okay because, it provides more security, or more stable security, what happens when the price of the coin goes down? That security goes away anyways, and the machines get shut off. So that's not a very good argument, in my humble opinion, at the end of the day either. You just end up with more e-waste, I guess, because you can't repurpose that equipment. And I would have to point to Ethereum, where Ethereum didn't have large hash rate swings during its entire run on GPUs because, well, it was a project that was being utilized at a very high level. I think at the end of the day, the actual usability of the project and how well it is being maintained and developed is a key indicator as to how much hash rate will be provided to that network, and that it promotes essentially innovation within the space. That's my humble opinion surrounding it. Now, with Bitcoin, you can still invest in all of these projects, right? And you can still invest in all of the hardware, copy the strategies to essentially put yourself in a good financial position, whether that's buying ASICs and holding them until you sell them during a bull run. I get it. That's the type of things that are going to take place. If you see a lot of backing behind something like Caspa and you invest in Caspa and that is your investment strategy, I understand that. That is fine. The only thing that I'm talking about is if we actually want to have a decentralized future that we envision where competition within the market is fair and distributed, and you have access to that, then we aren't going down that path anymore. I think we lost that path a long time ago with Bitcoin, and I think we're losing it even on the altcoin side of things. I thought for a long time the biggest threat was proof of stake to decentralization, and now I'm finding it really is ASICs at the end of the day. And that's really an interesting thing to consider if you really think about it. We were worried about, AWS, Google services, all that with proof of stake maintaining a majority of the hardware. But if you have a single entity that has a majority of the hash rate and potentially backdoors into all of the units via the control boards, I mean, are you really in a better position? I don't know. Let's talk about BlockX moving off of ASICs in a surprising move. Now, BlockX is a project that I covered and did some speculative mining on with my, that was the D9, I believe, on the X11 algorithm. And they are transitioning off of that X11 algorithm to Autolycos V2 in the latest Medium blog post from BlockX on July 17th, 2024. They say goodbye to ASICs and hello to more decentralized future. As a historic milestone, BlockX will be the second ever coin to use the Autolycos 2 algorithm. Following Ergo, we are transitioning our hashing algorithm from X11 to Autolycos 2. This is really interesting because the only algorithm or the only project that has utilized Autolycos V2 has been Ergo in the past. And now we're seeing that mining algorithm get applied to a new project. Most new projects that were going ASIC resistant here in the recent past have decided to develop their own in collaboration with, of course, the LOL miner developer. And that was both Meowcoin as well as Ironfish, right? Both coming out with their own ASIC resistant algorithms. And now we're seeing one move over to Autolycos. Now, in both of those cases, there was discussion surrounding utilizing Autolycos V2 or creating an entire algorithm or going with ProgPal, right? I think those were pretty much the options. The reasoning behind not going with Autolycos V2 was primarily due to its inefficiency from the perspective of being able to utilize the entire power of GPUs, meaning like, especially on the memory side of things, what you would see would be like a 30% allocation of the memory. And so to make it a little bit more ASIC resistant, utilize all of the available power on the GPUs. The decision was made by those projects to go ahead and utilize an entirely new mining algorithm and to get one developed. And supposedly those are functioning as expected. Now, the reason behind not going with Kapow is it ProgPal really has a negative stigma surrounding it for basically heat and power consumption, right? And that really, from a miner perspective, has put off a lot of miners from, at least in the summer, not running their GPUs on the ProgPal algorithms. However, I would say that Oh God, a Girl, in collaboration with everyone else on the Ravencoin project, etc., did a very good job at making sure ProgPal will be as ASIC resistant as possible. So longevity-wise, I would think that ProgPal would probably be the safest bet as far as not being able to crack the code with ASICs down the line. That's just kind of more of a feeling than any hard data at this point. But that comes at expense of, high power consumption and heat, which you got to dissipate. That is kind of the whole surrounding thing. So it's really interesting that we have, I think, Autolicos V2 from X11 happening here on BlockX. The distribution is going to be interesting as well, too, because you got to keep in mind that this particular project is a proof of work, proof of stake combination. So half of the block reward, essentially, I think there's, we could go over the tokenomics again, I guess. I did cover them before. I think it's actually like 45% to nodes, 45% to miners, something along those lines. Pretty standard for these, I guess, Dash clones. Obviously, this one's going to set itself apart by being GPU mineable, I think. Says this change will open up mining opportunities for everyone, making it more accessible and equitable, ensuring stability and continuity for our network stakeholders. This switch will not affect our master nodes, and operations with master nodes will continue as before. So here's why they made the change. Consider Alex a tech enthusiast with a powerful gaming GPU. Under the previous X11 algorithm, they couldn't compete with large ASIC miners and felt excluded from participating in BlockX mining. With the switch to Autolicos 2, Alex can now use their GPU to mine BlockX effectively. This change democratizes mining, allowing individuals like Alex to contribute to the network, earn rewards, and support the ecosystem. And I think this is a very important thing to bring up for participation within networks too. A really great move, I think, for just getting your name out there as a project. And this is just from a completely separate perspective. Like, let's take decentralization and throw it out the window for a second, right? Let's take it out, throw it out the window, right? If you want your project to be adopted, you need users. And the best way to attract users is to give them a value proposition. Well, a value proposition of buying the coin and then waiting for it to go up in price is not as great as the value proposition of pointing your GPU at it and making some in return. And there are more people that own GPUs than there are that own ASICs for the specific algorithm that you have. Therefore, it goes to show that basically if you basically allow people to participate that have a wider audience of people that own GPUs, then you bring more people into your ecosystem, which means that you basically further decentralize the volume on, or the amount of supply that you have, right, on that network. And I think that's an important piece that a lot of people miss. I think without the evolution with a lot of projects, even including Bitcoin, as well as including Litecoin, Dogecoin, all of them, the natural progression had gone from CPUs to GPUs, FPGAs there for a little bit, and then, of course, ASICs. And a big portion of the community for each individual project has been built up during the GPU phase. The largest onboarding of users typically happens during the GPU phase, and that is really important for a project. So I think if you throw the fundamentals out the window as far as decentralization goes, there's an important factor there from a marketability standpoint for project owners. So I think that's what they're really highlighting here, and I think it's a good point. Now, they do go on to say decentralization. So they say ASIC mining often leads to the centralization of mining power where only a few with specialized hardware can participate. By switching to the Autolicos 2 algorithm, we enable GPU-based mining, which allows a broader range of participants to join and contribute to the network. This move is essential for promoting decentralization as it redistributes mining power more evenly across our user base. And I think, like, obviously, when they're saying this, it does still tie back to the idea of onboarding more users. But at the same time, it also encourages your hashing algorithm to be more decentralized across a wider network, which then, of course, basically makes the system more robust, provided miners aren't hopping too much off and on. The question that I'll have here coming up, of course, for BlockX in particular, is if they will have any sort of difficulty adjustment issues. Because in the past, of course, with GPU projects, even with some X11 projects, I believe this had happened as well, because there were a lot of spinoffs. You saw the difficulty adjustments basically not adjusting quick enough and slowing down the chain, et cetera, et cetera. So that will be something that has to be addressed. Now, finally, it does go on to talk about enhanced security. Now, the argument, I think, for ASICs in general in the past has been that you have a more steady security because people are locked into that ecosystem with that specific algorithm. In this particular case, it's different because X11 is pretty widespread, and you have a single coin that takes up a majority of the X11 hash rate, which is going to be the Dash, and that can create an opportunity for attacks on smaller networks utilizing the same hashing algorithm through, of course, services like NiceHash, mining rig rentals, and so on. So Autolicos 2 offers improved resistance to ASICs, which helps prevent centralization and enhances the network security against potential attacks. This algorithm ensures that mining remains competitive and fair, reducing the risk of a few entities controlling a large portion of the mining power. Now, you could say, of course, well, that's not a problem on big pool or big projects, right? But we're starting to read, like we were talking about earlier today, as of the new research that we just covered, that even Bitcoin could be under the threat, technically, of a 51% attack. It would just be against the miner's best interests. So key benefits, they go over it again, just decentralization, security, energy efficiency, and marketplace integration and utility. Now, the two here that are covered that I wanted to look at again is the energy efficiency, which says it's designed to consume less energy. Autolicos 2 makes the network more sustainable and reduces operational costs for miners. I think it depends at scale, right? Like, this is something that you would have to compare to the current energy efficiency of the big X11 miners and so on. I think really this means, I think it's a game of scale. And if you're at a smaller scale on a GPU, it's more affordable for you to participate. And I think that's really what it comes down to. I don't know that efficiency can really play into that necessarily. And efficiency essentially means a lot of different things. You could say total efficiency to mine one BlockX, right? Or you could say efficiency, how efficient is the algorithm at utilizing the specific hardware, right? Which we talked about in the beginning. Technically, Autolicos 2 is not as efficient as some of the other options because it doesn't fully utilize the GPU. So it depends on what you're talking about. You can say that in an advertising post, but there's multiple factors that have to be, looked at in this particular case. So I'm going to push back on that one in particular. Marketplace integration and utility is interesting too. That wasn't covered. The BlockX marketplace integrates GPU computing power for tasks like rendering and machine learning, supporting ecosystem growth. It encourages more mining participation, boosting demand and utility for the BlockX token. Now, this has been true when we talk about where DeFi got its roots. Let's just say that right off of the bat. Most of those roots were coming from GPU miners looking to basically compound their mining rewards into something more by providing liquidity back to the network. And if they are truly going to add things like rendering, machine learning, AI, that sort of stuff into the algorithm with some bonuses added to it, a la, Dynex or something along those terms, then this becomes more interesting. But it is true that you do drive participation up by having uh, a wider spread distribution of the supply of the token itself, because then more people will actually be utilizing the network. And then obviously, I think you have to have the platforms on top of that to make it worth it. Now, will BlockX have that? They're working on it. It does look like they are. I talked to Radiant yesterday, and that video will be coming out tomorrow. One of the key points was, the launch of RxD20, and the amount of participation on the network has grown exponentially to the point to where there have been more transactions. Let me get this right. 30% of the total transactions since inception of Radiant were done in the last month. There was something like 1 million transactions done in the last 30 days on Radiant, whereas since its inception, there have only been a total of 3 million transactions. Watch the video tomorrow to make sure that I got that right. It's somewhere around there. It's a pretty impressive amount of transactions and participation on the network when you launch those platforms, and that's going to be the most important part. So you can have miners more spread out. You can have more individuals participating thanks to the lower cost of the hardware and the more ubiquitous availability of it. But that doesn't mean anything if you don't have things to participate within on the network, right? And that's kind of, at the end of the day, the big concern that, I think even Caspa is facing with, getting Casplex online at this point, right? Because you got to drive, especially in Caspa's case where you have accelerated emissions, you got to drive fees up to basically maintain your security budget in the future, which is going to be really, really important. And that experiment's going to be fascinating to watch as it unfolds. Now, when is this happening? We are currently in the implementation and testing phase on our blockchain for transitioning to Autolicos 2 algorithm. This significant update involves successfully converting our algorithm from Scala to C++, which has been completed. We anticipate full adapting the new algorithm within the next 1 to 2 weeks to ensure a smooth transition for our community. The exact block height will be announced 72 hours in advance. I believe we were looking at August 10th right now, but I'll keep a close eye on that. Follow me on Twitter at SonOfATech, and of course, I will let you guys know when I see more changes coming through. Let me know what you guys think about the swap to GPUs. I think here's what I've noticed. This is actually kind of interesting. We've had the trend here recently where you have, let's just say the latest three. Let's say the latest three new proof of work layer 1 blockchains in Caspa, Alephium, and then Radiant. And of course, there's Nexa, but there's no hint of ASICs yet for Nexa, even though their plan is. All three launched with intention of going to ASICs. Now, we have fundamentally different strategies, I think, from an emission standpoint on all three, where Caspa, fast emissions, you got, I believe, Radiant planning for longer emissions to have basically more guaranteed security for a longer amount of time. You have different strategies that are going in there, but the trend has been basically build a layer 1 blockchain with some unique features, onboard some sort of ASIC manufacturer to back that project, and then basically work with that ASIC manufacturer to build the units, get the supply out, drive the hype up, and invest into the project to drive the price in fiat up on those projects. Now, on the flip side, what we've seen is now we've started to see a lot of projects move away from ASICs, right? So we saw Meowcoin, well, moving off of Kapow, but that was a little bit different. And then Ironfish kind of pushing back against, preparing for that with their GPU launch. But now we're seeing, this swap from X11 to essentially a GPU mineable coin. And we're starting to see more and more forks of Caspa and Carlson hash and all of that to get a Caspa variant of a GPU resistant or a GPU mineable coin. the projects that appear to be essentially courting the GPU miners, for lack of a better term, seem to be the projects that did not have quite the hype surrounding them. At least that's what I'm noticing. So if you look at like the courting of the GPU miners, it's coming from projects that don't have as many participants. And frankly, I think that's a good strategy for the aforementioned reasons of basically there's more people that own GPUs. So if you want more people to be aware of your project, allow it to be GPU mineable and more people will participate. And I think we'll see that more and more depending on, what the outcry from the general public surrounding cryptocurrency is and how successful some of these projects are with their move, right? So pay attention. I'm really interested to see where it goes. At the end of the day, I think you probably, your biggest risk on any project, whether it's ASIC or GPU mineable, is whether or not the algorithm is available on NiceHash and whether or not there are other projects that have access to that algorithm, right? So from a 51% attack, that's probably the biggest threat, other than, of course, second biggest threat is you have an entity that's unknown that controls all the hash power and puts 50% of its hash power on a single pool. Well, then you're also having to worry about bad actors hacking that pool. So there's that too, but that's more on the only an ASIC risk, I suppose, probably also an FPGA risk as well. Or just a pool risk, right? Obviously, you need multiple pools to keep all of this thing afloat, and that's a big problem there. Let's talk about CyberSwap coming out here soon. It's in testnet. Now, this is just a token on the Ethereum blockchain. They're doing some AI things that are really interesting. The link will be down in the description. Technically, yes, I do have some Cyber that was given to me, and I have it staked, so I've been following it. I'm going to follow it a little bit more closely. I'm interested in what happens with it as far as all that is concerned. A lot of people are wanting them to focus on centralized exchanges, etc. This has been an interesting debate, I think, as a whole. Okay, so we're going to go into community funds. It's not a fun topic, right? And what community funds are used for and how people respond to different ways that people utilize community funds in the developer side of things. Because I think a lot of developers don't understand the perception that a lot of people have when they see something like community funds being utilized for booths at Consensus or Bitcoin conference or something along those lines, right? And I think that's for good reason, because what we've seen in some projects, for example, with Veriscoin, they use the community funds to spend like $250,000 or something like that is what they said on a booth and suites, food, events, all that sort of stuff at Consensus. And I think there's a portion of the community that sees that and then also sees the lack of presence of Veriscoin on centralized exchanges and raises some questions. Well, why wasn't a portion of those funds being utilized to put on centralized exchanges so that it gets more eyeballs on it, so that my investment is actually going to be worth something? I think that's valid as far as that's concerned. But you could also be utilizing those community funds to build up, liquidity pools, etc., on something like CyberSwap. And I'm kind of curious what everybody thinks, because at the end of the day, if I bring that up with someone from Verus, for example, the argument would be that Verus is supposed to be a decentralized platform that basically bypasses centralized exchanges at the end of the day anyways. So if your primary goal is to get to that, then why list on centralized exchanges? They have a point. Centralized exchanges are essentially, the thing that we're supposed to be pushing back against fundamentally. So why would you put any sort of effort into participating in those realms, especially with how scammy some of them can be, like we saw with what Trade Ogre did to Caspa in the past? You can put yourself in a pretty dark situation there and have bad public perception by working with the wrong centralized exchange. And you're not even doing something that's fundamentally correct from the Bitcoin white paper. So I'm curious how everybody thinks about that. I kind of get both sides. I'd like to hear your thoughts and opinions in the comment section as well as the live chat. But anyways, Cyba's going, or the Cyba token is going to have Cyba swap for Cybría, or however it's pronounced. I don't actually know, but an interesting project launched there. Now, Lithium is coming to Zelcore. So a quick note on that. You got the beautiful Daniel Keller there and them talking about this. If you want to go see it, it's linked down below. It's posted by Baby X Triple D, which is the post I'm utilizing for the reference here. It's unofficial, I guess, at this point, from the Cyberpunk or the Cypherpunk 2024. Do you guys use Zelcore? Like, I keep hearing mixed. I guess, reviews of Zelcore itself. Like, in some cases, a lot of people say it works really well. In some cases, it doesn't work really well. I think there was a big kerfuffle surrounding Caspa and the Zelcore wallet. Overall, I think that what Flux is doing as far as onboarding a ton of different projects into Zelcore is very interesting. As long as you keep in mind that Zelcore is still inherently centralized. I'm not a big fan of Zelcore, but I'm also not a big fan of hardware wallets either. So, a lot of people will be like, "Oh, should I get a Trezor or should I get a Ledger?" And I'm like, "Paper, bro. I don't know what to tell you. I'm not generating my seeds on a piece of hardware that I didn't build or understand myself." Right? At the end of the day, there's risks in everything. You can go as crazy as I go, right, and try to lock everything down as much as possible. And then I consider hardware wallets to be more warm wallets. And they're things that I'll utilize if I'm sending and receiving assets a lot to that particular unit, right? So if I'm getting like affiliate money from Coastal Crypto, then I'll have it go to a hardware wallet and then I'll disperse it out from there, for example, a fully hot wallet that has centralized aspects to it. I mean, I'm kind of curious how people feel about that in general. You also have, ton of other software wallets that you can utilize. At the end of the day, if you can recover like a 12-word seed phrase, I don't really care what wallet you use. If it's hot, it's hot. So just keep that in mind. But I think it's good to always see people or I think what Flux is doing as far as working with a bunch of different blockchains is good for both Flux and the other blockchains and the ecosystem as a whole, because we do see like a lot of competitive talk, from, for example, like Kadena and Caspa fighting all the time. I mean, at the end of the day, like, who gives a fuck? Like, whichever project is going to develop the most and do the most to push everything along, I think that's the project people will gravitate towards at the end of the day. So arguing over who is doing a better job seems silly, because I think it'll be obvious at the end of the day. And it's, funny enough, both Kadena and Caspa are available on Zelcore. So there you go. A little hint coming down the line. Now, something I preached against for quite a long time are pre-farms and pre-mines. I have had Bram Cohen on this channel previously. I think that he's a really interesting guy. He's very hard to communicate with. I think that he has an interesting personality that can be, rub people the wrong way a lot. I think that everyone has good intentions, but they make bad decisions. I'll say that before we get into this. This topic's kind of weird. So at the very beginning of Chia, my biggest problem with Chia at the end of the day is that you basically have VC backing to a certain extent, and you have these pre-farms that are going to funding developers. Now, a lot of people say, well, developers got to eat and all that sort of stuff too. Sure, but if you're a developer of a project and you believe in that project, there are a couple different ways that you could go about that. One, hopefully you're going to be mining it yourself, or in this case, farming it yourself for Chia, and therefore you probably would have the biggest bag as it is, right? Or a decently large bag. And so that would push you as a developer to basically build the project to bring the value of your particular bag up, right? That's probably the best way to do it. I mean, that is at least from an ethical standpoint, it's unquestionably the best. You hop in, you release it fair launch, you do it with everybody else, and so on. The second way is like community funding, where essentially other holders of your coin basically put it into a community fund for the developers to utilize. And that is, basically off of the charity of the community, which is a little less reliable, but, like in the case of Coin, has proven to be extremely successful. And the final way is that you say, I'm just going to take a bunch of the coin and have that for myself at the very beginning, and then let everybody else farm it out. And as those things unlock, like we see with Lithium here recently, that can have the potential to drive the price up or down. I think the issue that's been going on with Chia, as I understand it, just to be clear, is that they have started selling off some of their pre-farm. Now, it's somewhere between 1% and 2% per month. I think total is still under 5% of the total supply, if I understand correctly, not of the pre-farm itself. And that is being done to fund the project, which means obviously pay for the developers and so on to continue to develop. Now, this has caused a dip in the price of Chia, I think by about 20%. It did go down below that, even lower than that, but did recover a little bit. And there's been a lot of kind of talk surrounding it, where I'm getting a lot of messages within Twitter. I did say that this would end up happening, which it isn't anything special. I didn't call out something that was like, oh, so like a big revelation. It's like, if you have a pre-farm, the intention is to sell it. Now, I think at the beginning, the problem was what Chia had said, or what the foundation had said. I shouldn't say Chia, CNI, which is separate, right? I guess, but Chia is the token or the project, and then XCH the token, and then CNI, the company behind Chia. Anyways, at the end of the day, I'd said they would sell it. The problem is at the beginning, it was stated that there could be securities concerns. Basically, if you have this type of pre-farm that's going to a corporation, then you are basically creating a security issue, and securities issue. At the end of the day, now they're kind of backpedaling on that and saying, what they said, let me be clear, is that because they weren't selling it, it wasn't a security. But now that they're selling it, people are saying, well, it's a security now. And they're saying, no, it's not a security, contradicting their original statement that because they weren't selling it, it wasn't a security. There we go. Here's what I find with a lot of developers and a lot of companies like this, is that they like to gaslight you and make you feel stupid when you call them out for something they said in the very first place. And it's extremely frustrating to the community. And I think that is what they're experiencing. And we're seeing a lot of these communication breakdowns from a lot of different projects. We've seen it with Radiant. We're seeing it with Chia. We see it on and on and on and on. And this is just humans, I think, at the end of the day, which is going to bring me back to the final thing, of course, here, which is like, even though we have a centralization problem with the mining hardware surrounding Bitcoin, the reason Bitcoin is what it is because we don't have that human problem. So if you're a Bitcoin maximalist, I think that's the strongest foundational argument that you can have, is that, like, look, we aren't going to have all of these issues because we just don't have the people problem to the extent that other ones do. And when you talk about Chia in particular, they have a huge people problem because they have an entire company behind it. And I think that is a little concerning, and I still think it's a concern surrounding Chia personally. Now, Hunting Ground posted that XCH farmers have to stay strong in the altcoin winter. These are challenging times, of course, with negative price action, pre-farm sales, and pre-IPO silence. There are also reasons to remain optimistic. He says CNI are continuing to execute according to the roadmap, and they have strong legal opinion that selling the pre-farm is legal non-security and doesn't affect the farm coin or secondary sales regardless. Now, I think it affects the secondary sales, because if you affect price by selling and driving it down, I think you would affect that. And then in addition to that, I haven't seen any actual legal representation that has stated it's a non-security, just assumptions from the founders, right? Goes on to say that CNI are progressing positively with IPO process and the SEC, and are now waiting for the right timing in the market. CNI have paying customers and are just supplementing with XCH sales. In the meantime, CNI will continue to use their resources available, including the pre-farm, to fund operations and have a long runway available. He says he was initially hoping that we would see some positive price action within 3 to 5 years of mainnet, and now the time horizon has lengthened to 7 to 10 years. He'll keep farming on existing equipment in the meantime. I think that it has been confirmed that the pre-farm is being sold and not loaned, I believe, at this point, in case you guys were worried about that. And then if you are wanting to, let me go get this up for you guys here real quick. If you're wanting to see what the pre-farm sales are looking like, let me get this up for you guys. And I am going to have them on the channel here soon, which will be perfect. Let me see if I can find this. Digital Spaceport who is a big Chia guy. I recommend you guys go watch him if you want to set up farming. Had tweeted at me the pre-farm. Here it is. Yeah. So I'll link this to you guys as well. Boom. I think it's on the XCH Ninja. Bam. And I think these are the markers. Yeah, the pre-farm sell markers. So you can see where they're being sold and how much has been sold. So if you want to go track that, make sure that you are tracking it. They are selling off, I think, some pretty big chunks. 1 million to 2 million at a time. So with a total of 18 million. Out of the $386 million US dollar value of the pre-farm. That's a lot of funding. There you go. All right, so Intel is not going to be issuing recalls for the Raptor Lake instability issues, unfortunately. Intel has responded to press inquiries about the instability issues affecting 13th and 14th gen processors. Questions from The Verge to Intel were prompted by an earlier, rather underwhelming statement that did not explicitly confirm how widespread the problem is and how affected customers should address it. The new answers finally clarify what users might do and what they should do if their CPUs are already affected. For the first time, Intel confirmed that the instability problem might affect not only K-series unlocked CPUs, but also non-K versions, which use the 65-watt TDP by default. The most important information, however, is that Intel will not issue a recall. All users impacted by instability issues should consider their CPUs irreversibly damaged, and even the upcoming microcode update will not fix the issue. Furthermore, users who have already tried to RMA their processors due to this issue can now reach out to Intel support again and seek remediation. Now, I think if they are irreversibly damaged, you should file for RMA at the end of the day. It's crazy that it's affecting the entire CPU line. I think as miners, most of us, if not all of us, other than GPU miners are purely utilizing Celeron CPUs, have swapped to utilizing AMD CPUs. Now, I was looking forward to the launch of the 9000 Ryzen CPUs. Unfortunately, that has been delayed. Rumors are it was actually just because of a misprint calling the Ryzen 7 9700 the Ryzen 9 9700, but I'm not too sure if that is the exact reason, but that is the rumor, which is quite funny. At the end of the day, though, if this isn't going to get fixed, this is pretty much a complete wash for Intel on the consumer grade CPU end of things, and everybody will be buying AMD at this point. I currently am streaming from a 14700K. It's been stable up until today, funny enough, where I started experiencing blue screens of death while trying to render in Adobe Premiere. I do have it undervolted. I noticed it was having a ton of weird instability issues at the very beginning because on all of my systems I run a bunch of tests as far as for benchmarking as well as stability testing, and I had caught those very early on in this system, brought down the voltages, and was pretty much stable across the board, like I said, until today. Unfortunately, I think I will try to RMA it. I do have a 12900K sitting in that little test bench over there, so I'll probably throw that in, see if I can get an RMA, and then move on from there. But let me know if you guys are running Intel 13 or 14th gen Raptor Lake CPUs and if you're having any issues and what you plan to do about it. NVIDIA GeForce RTX 4070s are going to be in short supply in China next month due to the lack of GDDR6X memory. Now, if we read this off the bat, what I was seeing from this rumor surrounding Twitter, especially the mining space, whether you're following Red Panda or Rabbit or whoever it may be, the sentiment was like, oh, we're going to have a shortage again, and then the market's going to take off, and it's going to be compounded. We've been waiting for that for a while. That hasn't happened. Now, in this particular case, I don't think it means what we would be dreading it means, which is a shortage of GPUs as a whole. And that is because, like, basically what we have is Hynix is in mass production of GDDR7. Now, the 50 series as well, the 50 series is going to be coming out here in the near future. It's not uncommon to start seeing production slow down on older models. And because we have a new type of memory that needs to be produced, I would assume that they're repurposing a lot of their fabrications to accommodate for the supply of GDDR7 that needs to be made. And so I'm actually not that worried about it. But it does say that the situation in the Chinese GPU market does not always mirror that in other regions as well. Market dynamics, supply chain factors, and local circumstances can vary significantly. Board channels, which provide direct updates from NVIDIA's authorized board partners, often give insights into the current status and official communications between GPU vendors and these companies. Today, it was reported that NVIDIA has informed its partners about a reduced supply of RTX 4070 cards for Chinese AIBs. It's important to note that this situation does not necessarily reflect the global GPU market as well. According to our information, some of these companies are currently relocating their graphics card assembly lines from China to bypass restrictions imposed by the US government on producing high-performance cards like the 4090 future models, which is also another compounding factor here as we're hearing shortage, but we're also, everybody's moving out of China for their manufacturing to get around the restrictions, not only on high-powered computing, but also in the event that we see Donald Trump come back into office, I would presume that we would also see higher tariffs on China. So it goes to show that if you want to actually be successful as a business, you would probably move the F out of China. Right? I mean, it would make sense. So it does say NVIDIA has been carefully controlling the supply of its 40 series cards using a scarcity strategy to balance supply and demand. By strictly managing the order quantities for AIC brands, they ensure that Chinese markets get just enough graphics cards for each month or quarter, no more, no less. According to the latest update from NVIDIA, the supply of RTX 4070 and higher models is likely to be even tighter in August than it was in July. The main reason for this expected shortage is a potential lack of GDDR6X memory that NVIDIA might face next month. Now, like I said, I think a lot of this is basically production changing, not only in location, but also in what they're actually manufacturing, because we have GDDR7 needing to be manufactured for the 50 series GPUs. And SK Hynix has confirmed that the mass production of GDDR7 memory will start much sooner than speculated. Previously, AnonTech reported that a company representative had said GDDR7 volume production would not begin until Q1 of 2025. However, the company quickly responded to these claims and confirmed that mass production will start sooner in Q4 of 2024. It seems the rumors have motivated SK Hynix engineers to speed up production of next-gen gaming memory. According to the latest press release, mass production will now start in the third quarter of 2024. And if we're talking about that in general, that is my reasoning behind the fact that essentially not only are we moving production out of China, not only is the shortage projected to be targeting China specifically, but we also have production starting on the 50 series. So it just goes to show that you would start to see reduction of supply in these other GPUs, especially as it pertains to China in this particular case. I don't think blowing out of proportion, saying that we're going to see basically 2021 levels of GPU pricing and scarcity happening anytime soon, at least unless something crazy happens in the next few months, which of course it could, because, you know, we have the topic of Bitcoin as a reserve, and then rising tide raises all ships, as they say. Now, I did just put together a system back here with a 7900X or 7950X. Ooh, excuse me. And that is for QuakeCon here next week. Like I said, if you are going to be at QuakeCon, let me know. I'd love to say hi to you, and that would be really cool. Now, I was going to wait until the 31st and pick up one of the new AMD processors so I could not only test it from the mining perspective, but also utilize it in the QuakeCon build and be the cool guy with the brand new processor at QuakeCon, because, you know, that would be fun. But that got delayed. To when, I'm not exactly sure. I think it's going to be August 15th or 14th. Is that it? Right? Something along those lines. Yeah, here in the article says the August 15th. So yeah. Anyways, there are some leaks of their Cinebench scores, and I am questioning whether or not I'm actually interested in purchasing one at all. So we have data on the Ryzen 9 9900X, the 9700X, and the 9600X. If you scroll down here, I'll show you guys here real quick. The 9900X at stock is only showing a score of 32,216 in Cinebench R23. With PBO, it's a little higher at 34,500. With PBO yesterday on my Ryzen 9 7950X, I had a score of 33,627, and that is on a mini ITX motherboard with only 8 CPU power. So typically, if I put that like in my Tai Chi motherboard, run PBO, I get way above 33,000. So I don't know what the hell's going on with this testing. But right now, it's not extremely impressive to me. Well, never mind. I guess I'm completely dumb. We have the 9950X to talk about, and I screwed that up. I was looking at this earlier, and I was like, what are these numbers? And that was because I clicked this picture right here. So I saw that wrong. Okay, so let's look at this again. It would be a big performance uplift. Glad I caught myself. So the 9950X stock will be 41,924. So that would actually be a nice performance uplift of 30%. Well, 30% is pretty standard, right? So 30% is going to be what we see year over year with any new generation, but at least it's on par, right? And then the PBO, I think with Expo, which is what I'm running here. So I do have Expo memory, to be clear. I think it's 6,000 on DDR5. That'll be 43,905. So there you go. So I'm still going to get one. I changed my mind. I'm back. I was wrong. I'm buying one. We'll see how it mines. Hopefully it gets a 30% uplift in mining as well. And hopefully the manufacturing issues were literally the misprint, right? So the reason the delay is rumored to be is they were printing Ryzen 9 9700X on the Ryzen 7 series CPUs. And so that's an easy mistake, but that is kind of funny. That's like a mistake I would make in a video title, right? Ryzen 9 9700X. Because I'm like, oh, 9009, 9009, just put the 9 there, but it's actually the second number in the SKU that counts for that. So there you go. I was going to ask everyone else also, it's getting hot in here, but the BitBoy Twitter has been taken down. I did see Adam Charles make a post. I watched his video earlier saying, BitBoy's been going through a lot. He's taking a break from Twitter. And I think Adam Charles is also taking a break from Twitter. The only thing I saw is I went to BitBoy's YouTube channel and I took a look at what he was talking about. His YouTube channel's still up and he was talking about crypto Wendy O and, still harping on like getting screwed over by the people at the Hit Network, so on and so forth. I'm a lone wolf. There's a reason for it. I mean, like, there's a reason for it. You know what I mean? It's just like, I'd rather be a normal dude that works a 9 to 5 and not participate in a lot of this stuff because it's a lot of drama. I'm not exactly sure what's happening. I think this is typical bear market blues. I do think some people will be caught doing things they shouldn't have done. Just like we saw in the previous bear market with Trayvon Martin going down, a little bit connect and all that bullshit. I think we'll see, what happens here. Is the Twitter getting deleted because there's evidence on that Twitter? Potentially. I don't know, but that could always be brought back up. I think Twitter could give, or X would give access, in the case of a court filing on that, if that is what's going on. Are there actually any truth to the allegations? I tried to watch the video. I didn't hear any hard evidence against crypto Wendy O. I don't necessarily think that they have like top-notch content as far as like discussing the technicals surrounding cryptocurrency. So it's not like I ever watched the channels anyways, but I figured it was newsworthy enough to bring up that, he was deleting videos. Now he's deleting, Twitter, Twitter posts or the entire Twitter account. It's really hard to spot, I think, potential bad actors in a bull run and easier to see them in the bear market. And I think the guys that stick around in the bear market are the guys you should make sure that you continue to follow. That's all I would have to say about it. And I even took a break in the last bear market. So I'm saying that against my own self. You know what I mean? I just think that, if you want to stay as safe as possible, at least if the influencer was sticking through the bear market, they're probably a little safer as far as that's concerned. Excuse the dogs, guys. That's a new thing we'll have to get used to. Warhog has a new node available. I believe it's actually all the way up to 0.6.6. If I'm correct, let's go check. I am correct. Released 3 days ago, and you can go through the full change log to see what exact code changes were made. So make sure you head on over there. I think there are some issues with the ordering of transactions or the way transactions were being mined specifically for that one. So there you go. Let's see. I think we only have one more topic before we get into the meat and the potatoes of today. And that is going to be faulty H100 GPUs with HBM3. Now, HBM in general, I think like the first HBM, which was on, obviously the AMD side of things, HBM2, which followed that up. I've had all of those cards, like the R9s, Nanos was one of my favorite GPUs. HBM's been kind of faulty from the very get-go, so this isn't as surprising as it might sound. I thought it was just an interesting piece of information, though. Faulty NVIDIA H100 GPUs and HBM3 memory caused half of failures during the Llama 3 training, one failure every 3 hours for Meta's 16,384 GPU training clusters. And so it goes on to say that basically Meta released the study detailing its Llama 3 405B model training run on a cluster containing 16,384 NVIDIA H100 80 gigabyte GPUs. The training run took place over 54 days, and the cluster encountered 419 unexpected component failures during that time, averaging one failure every 3 hours. In half of the failure cases, GPUs or their onboard HBM3 memory were to blame. As the old supercomputing adage goes, the only certainty with large-scale systems is failure. Supercomputers are extremely complex devices that use tens of thousands of processors, hundreds of thousands of chips, and hundreds of miles of cables. In a sophisticated supercomputer, it's normal for something to break down every few hours. And the main trick for developers is to ensure that the system remains operational regardless of such breakdowns. The scale and synchronous nature of 16,384 GPU training make it prone to failures. If the failures aren't mitigated correctly, a single GPU failure can disrupt the entire training job, necessitating a restart. However, the Llama 3 team maintained over a 90% effective training time. During a 54-day pre-training snapshot, there were 466 job interruptions, with 47 planned and 419 unexpected. Planned interruptions were due to automated maintenance, while unexpected ones mostly stemmed from hardware issues. GPU problems were the largest category, accounting for 58.7% of unexpected interruptions. Only 3 incidents required significant manual intervention. The rest were managed by automation. That's pretty cool. I'll nerd out on this stuff. Now, for anyone that ever tells you mining is easy, point them to this article and say, even Meta can't keep all their GPUs running, sir. Because it's a lot of work, man. It's a lot of work. And I think at the end of the day, that is your proof in the pudding. Now we're going to move on from here and move on to essentially talking about politics. We're going to talk about RFK Jr. promises to the Bitcoin Strategic Reserve. We're going to talk about Donald Trump, and we're going to talk about much more. Because of the nature of YouTube and its current restrictions on my channel, as well as no longer tracking my statistics, it has been found that more than likely that is due to the type of content I post and my opinions surrounding these subjects, as I am a single issue voter surrounding cryptocurrency. And therefore, I am going to move off of this platform and we will be over on Rumble. What I'm going to do is get you the link to Rumble so you can watch me on Rumble, and then you can over there. And then we will continue the show and all of the good stuff as far as that's concerned. So let me get that copied out for you guys for the YouTube live chat. And that is what I'm going to do. And if you don't like politics and opinions, well, don't come over and everybody's happy. You know, we'll be on Twitter as well if you want to watch on Twitter. So, and as well as locals and that sort of thing. So I think I'm going to do that now.